Welcome, viewers and listeners, to the Total Football Analysis Serie A podcast. We are the Thinking Fans podcast. Each week, we get together with our besties who are current pro players, real coaches, academics, and stat heads. Join the revolution, which will be televised and podcasted. I'm co-host Chris Mumford, known as the Professor at UNC Chapel Hill. My co-host, Daniel Prock, whom we call 009 because he is a debonair current pro striker at the Raleigh Bureau.
Chris, I still haven't figured out how you came up with that cool nickname. What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Serie A podcast. We're joined by Coach Steve Coleman, whom we call the mailman because he always delivers all the way from Wellington, New Zealand, where it's 7:30 a.m. So welcome back and good morning, Steve.
Morning, Danny. How you going?
I'm good, thanks. And we also like to welcome our analyst, Tom, from the London Bureau. He's an absolute football manager maniac, but also, according to his friends, he is an exemplary attitude. So that's why we call him Model Citizen. What's up, Tom?
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Good, good. This weekend, we'll finally get to watch some action from our Serie A teams. But before the league restarts, we'll be able to enjoy some appetizers with the second legs of the Coppa Italia games. The semifinals. On Friday, we'll have Juventus against Milan, starting from a 1-1 aggregate. And on Saturday, we'll have Napoli against Inter, starting from a 1-0 aggregate for the Partenopei. So Coppa Italia is quite a big deal because besides the prestige of the trophy, winning it guarantees an automatic spot for the Europa League next season. So why don't we go ahead and we look at what to expect from these games, starting with Friday's game between Juventus and AC Milan. We know that we're still 4 days away from the game, so things can change for Sarri and Pioli, but this is what it should look like. So Juventus should play a 4-3-3 with Buffon in goal. In the defensive line, we'll have from right to left Quadrado, De Ligt, Bonucci, Alexandro. The middle three will be Ramsey, Bentancur, and Matuidi. And on top, we should see Douglas Costa with Dybala and Ronaldo. As far as AC Milan, we'll have Donnarumma in goal. AC Milan will play a 4-4-2 with Calabria, Kier, Romagnoli, and Laxalt. They will be the back four. Çalhanoğlu, Kessie, Bennacer, and Bonaventura, they will be the midfield, and the front two guys should be Ante Rebic and Rafael Leao. So before we get into a deep analysis of a deep preview of this game, why don't we look back at the first leg, which was played in February. And Steve, what should we expect from this game according to the first leg?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It seems such a long time ago now since we saw this game, but going back and reviewing it over the last couple of days, it's actually a bit of a stalemate. A little bit of action, lot of shots, but not too many kind of chances created that genuine opportunities. But one of the big things that came out of it was Dybala's shift into kind of either the false nine position or the top of the diamond, depending on which way you want to term that kind of move. But he managed 80 passes in the game, but only 3 of them had a key rating to them, and his XG was low, down at 0.1, which was a little bit unusual for him. He's very, very active, but there wasn't a lot of kind of moments of danger that he created. The next part of it was Juventus actually pressed quite high, and certainly around their counter pressing with Sarri's use of the counter press was a big feature. And actually, they recovered half of the balls that they actually went after in the Milan half, which was interesting to see. And because of that, Milan actually went around the pressure as opposed to through Juventus. They made a specific moment to target either side, but mostly Ronaldo. We know that Ronaldo's defensive structures are tolerated as opposed to he does his bit but doesn't do a hell of a lot. So you'll notice on the images on the left hand side that down the right 20 attacks, and then down the left 20 attacks. So they went around as much as they went through. And again, Milan's high line was able to negate a lot of threat from Juventus, because there was a lot of times where Dybala gets the ball off the front and then doesn't have necessarily the running in behind. Costa a little bit deeper, helping out in the defensive line for Juventus, and then Ronaldo wanting the ball to feet a lot more these days didn't actually give them the threat in behind to work Milan's back line. So if we just go through some images for those watching, and I'll talk over the top for those listening. So one of the keys to Juventus winning this game is definitely going to be trying to find Dybala in that pocket again. With the Milan defence being stretched across the pitch by the two wide players, it will definitely be lots of opportunities for him to get on the ball in this area. But the more they can push Milan back towards their own goal, to either get the ball to Ronaldo's feet or try and find Costa with supporting runners around them, will be really key. It's going to be a good opportunity to get Ronaldo close to the box and cutting in off that left-hand side onto his stronger side in front of the goal. So the more they can do this, the more opportunities they're going to get.
I have a question for you, Steve. So it looks like Costa, Ronaldo, and Dybala will play on top in a three-man attack. Do you think that Dybala will act as a false nine? Will he drop? How do you think that's going to look like?
Yeah, I think that they were obviously it was a definite ploy for them to use that in the first leg against Milan. Whether he chooses to maybe leave Costa out and play Higuain through the middle, and it switches to more of that diamond shape that they've used a little bit. But as we spoke about recently with Juventus, the last 10 games they've certainly played more of a 4-3-3. So I would expect to see him in a similar position here, with Ronaldo off the left and Costa off the right, with Higuain probably coming off the bench if they need a bit more of a focal point later on. And then one of the keys for Milan, as I spoke about earlier, would be to try and overload their fullback space. Alex Sandro, especially being on Ronaldo's side, the ability to play through Ronaldo. He does his part defensively, but he's not overly active. He tends to stand in a position and hope he's doing his bit. So they can play through him quickly into the midfield line and then create an overload against the Juventus fullback. They can get the fullback out of the line, and it certainly creates opportunities for them to either get in behind the fullback space or come back inside and then overload the two centre-back positions. And if they can do that, depending on whichever side Ronaldo is on, or whether it's Costa dropping too deep and encouraging the Milan fullback forward, then they can certainly exploit those types of opportunities. But as I mentioned earlier, they tended to go round Juventus as opposed to through them a lot in the first game. So expect to see more of that.
Yeah, speaking of fullbacks, we know that AC Milan will not be able to count on Theo Hernandez, a left back who has really impressed this season. He's only 22 years of age, scored 5 goals in the league. Tom, why don't you shoot me some data about this guy?
Yeah, well, he's been pivotal towards their ball progression this season, as we know, as we'll discuss later on. Milan like to progress from deep through their fullbacks. So if I just get up some data here, his progressive run distance per 90 minutes is 245 meters on average, which is quite far. He's quite far ahead of second in the team as well at 171 meters. So he's pretty key in that aspect. He's been pretty solid defensively as well. 7.8 defensive duels per 90 at 58% success rate, which isn't outstanding, but it's solid. It's about league average, I would say. And then he's also, as you mentioned, that final third ability, 7 goals and assists in the league this season. He's 4th for shots taken within fullbacks in the league as well. And the ones above him in that list are either set piece takers or they're more like wing backs. So yeah, he's been vital to them this season. One of their best players.
Yeah, absolutely. Another player who will be missing will be Zlatan Ibrahimović. So, Steve, I know that your next point will be about AC Milan threatening Juventus in front of the back line. How do you think that will play out without such a big presence like Zlatan? Yeah,
it's going to be interesting to see what they do with his absence. Obviously, another key to the victory, once they've overloaded that fullback space, there's lots of opportunities for them to come back inside then into spaces created in front of the Juventus back line where they drop a little bit deeper to protect the goal. So in the first leg, with Ibrahimović coming off the front to link the play together, was a real threat for them, with runners coming inside. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with this type of situation, but whether they use kind of more runs in behind with the front two being a little bit more mobile than the big man. It'll be interesting to see, but certainly that space in front of the back four, once they've gone around the pressure to go through them more higher up the pitch, then I think that'll be a real key for them.
Yeah, let me add a couple of thoughts to this preview. So while Juventus can count on a full squad, AC Milan are missing 3 key players. So we talked about Hernandez, Zlatan, but also Samu Castillejo, the right winger. He has the highest number of key passes per 90 in the league. And because AC Milan also crosses a lot, they actually cross more than Juventus. His absence will certainly be felt. If you guys remember the first leg goal, it came off of a cross from Castillejo. The second thing I wanted to say is that just remember that because of the first leg score, AC Milan is going to have to score at least a goal away at the Juventus Stadium, because a 0-0 draw will qualify Juventus thanks to the away goal rule. But we know that AC Milan has trouble scoring. They actually have the worst difference between expected goals and actual goals scored in the league. So they've scored 10.4. So they should have scored 10.4 more goals than what they actually have scored so far. That's why we're going to have Tom now dig deeper into some of the problems that AC Milan has had this season, and why not also some of the key plays that Pioli has introduced since coming to the team.
So yeah, we're just going to look at the question. We're going to look at the end is Stefano Pioli a short-term fix or a long-term candidate at AC Milan? And given the links to other managers, maybe that question's answering itself, but we're going to discuss it either way. So we're just going to briefly discuss here the switch from Giampaolo to Pioli. Obviously, we're looking at very small sample size here. Giampaolo had 7 games. He started off with a 4-3-1-2 with Suso at that cam role, but it wasn't really working for him, and Suso was not getting the best out of Suso. So he then switched to a 4-3-3. But then, I think, did he win his last game, Giampaolo, or did he lose his last game?
Oh, I can't remember as of now.
But he didn't have a great win percentage, and he was moved on. Pioli ran with the 4-3-3 for a while, but then when Zlatan was introduced, he preferred to play a 4-4-2, a 4-2-3-1, or in the first leg of this Coppa Italia match, they played a 4-4-1-1 with Calhanoglu behind Zlatan. So generally, they improved defensively under Pioli, but their attacking threat was still very limited. And we're going to cover the defensive, how they improved defensively under Pioli here.
Sorry, let me chime in for a second. You can tell how Ibrahimović and Rebic, those 2 guys, they completely changed the attacking side of AC Milan. They're big presences in the box, big guys. They fight a lot, and they're also they act as they post up a lot, so they allow the team to take a breath and come up all together. But Chris, I wanted to, since you have a goalkeeper's past, I wanted to ask you something before Tom digs deeper into the AC Milan defense. So on Friday, we're going to have Donnarumma, AC Milan's keeper, who's 21 years of age in his 5th season as a starting keeper for AC Milan. And on the other goal, we're going to have Gianluigi Buffon, who's twice as old. He's 42. That's right, 42. What do you think about it, Chris?
I will tell you, in my August years, Daniele, I cheer for the old guy. So I'll be cheering for Buffon. You know, he's not played that many games, less than 10. I think about 7 matches or so. And frankly, he has 2 more actual goals than his expected goals, while he's yet his very young counterpart is pretty much his expected goals versus actual goals is pretty much on par. So my sense is that Donnarumma's season is solid, not spectacular, and Buffon, you know, 7 games is hard for a keeper to get into a rhythm on. But hey, he's the old guy. I'm going to cheer for him.
He needs his rest. That's why he only played 7.
Yeah, it's a hell of a victory lap.
That's right.
Okay, go ahead, Tom, and talk to us about what has changed defensively when Pioli came over.
So yeah, here we're just seeing a clip from, well, not clip, a screenshot from Milan beat Brescia 1-0 recently. And we can see here that the Brescia player is passing it to his teammate, and Rafa Leao is already pressing against that player, which is something we didn't really see under Giampaolo, and we see it in the next slide as well. And then we just see again, Tonali has passed it to his teammate on the wing here, and Conte is immediately pressing him. Just puts them under pressure and leaves them limited in their attacking options. And then we'll see in the next slide. Before, when Giampaolo was here, the clear weakness was they couldn't defend against width. So we can see 2 Fiorentina players here linking up together. Basically, Chiesa cuts inside and goes past the AC Milan defender and passes it on towards his teammate. And we can see here actually that Leao is coming back to defend here, but he's doing it so passively that it's not really adding any real value to the side. And then we'll see further on down the line that Chiesa does end up managing to get the ball inside the box and crossing it in for what could have been a high quality chance. This doesn't end up in a goal, but it could have been a goal for Fiorentina.
Yeah, it seemed like things never really clicked under Giampaolo. I mean, the manager had a great season the year before with Sampdoria. I remember Quagliarella being able to score almost 30 goals under his management. I guess he wasn't given enough time maybe at AC Milan. That's a big problem for the club. They've changed so many coaches since Carlo Ancelotti left.
Well, I don't know if you saw that quote, what Giampaolo said when he came into AC Milan. He said it was as if they never had a training session together before. So there was clearly some underlying issues before he even got there, and he just couldn't fix them, and not in the time he was given anyway.
Yeah, and there is this big question. Are the coaches just not good enough, or are the AC Milan players just mediocre? Their quality is just not high enough to perform at the levels that we were used to, right? In the early 2000s, the AC Milan would always get to the quarterfinals or semifinals of Champions League. I don't know, Steve, what do you think? Is that a coach or more of a player's problem?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think that obviously the Milan of the early 2000s, the 2005 sides, Ancelotti very close to my heart with their midfield diamond and the superstars that they had in that side. But they're certainly not an AC Milan side that you can hold up as one of the best that they've had in certainly recent years. And obviously the impact of European football, or lack of it, over the last 3 or 4 years has had a real impact on who they can bring in with either financial clout or the competitions that they're playing in. So what you're seeing now is probably the knock-on effect of those situations. Whether a coach has enough time in 7 games to turn the corner. I think if people are seeing improvements or people are seeing differences, then you get more time. But whether you have enough time in the Italian game is up for debate, really. But what I will say is, from what I saw early season compared to what we're seeing now, there's certainly more organised defensively. There's less lack of more understanding of certain things that they do within the game in their defensive structure that leads me to believe that they're turning a corner a little bit, but still not scoring the goals that they perhaps should do.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to say it. One of the biggest problems has been that AC Milan has been missing those legendary players in the locker room. So even just when Zlatan Ibrahimović came in this past winter transfer window, even if he's 38, he's maybe not as mobile as he used to be. He changed so much about the team spirit. And from a locker room perspective, you can tell how he's just making the people around him work more, being more motivated. and having someone up there that is that big, is that important, let me tell you, that just makes you go twice as fast, makes you run twice as much during a game, because you know that you know, in a way you cannot let him down, if that makes sense.
Well, I think it's interesting because definitely last summer, I think the recruitment was going in the right direction. So, you know, signing more younger players rather than going for, like, let's think about Bonucci a couple of seasons ago, going for him. But, you know, going for the younger players, building for the future, I think it's the right move for AC Milan. But bringing in Ibra was also the right move as well, because, as you say, the locker room effect he has is just, pretty substantial.
Yeah.
It's the only move, though, isn't it? It's the only move if you can't attract the big names because of the competition you play in.
Yeah,
you can spin it any way you like, but you can only bring in the young ones if you don't have the quality of football every week in the Champions League, for example.
Yeah, and they're dealing with financial issues as well, aren't they? So yeah, it's tricky for them.
Exactly, it's a balance. You've got to have those seasoned players that younger players look up to, because otherwise, you can't really attract foreign players into a team that has been playing Champions League for, I lost the count, I don't know how many years now, but they have been out of that game for long.
So Tom, talk to me about the style of play of AC Milan. Can you characterize that?
So yeah, we just got a few points here. They like to play possession football via short passes. So through an eye test, they're not very ambitious with their passing, apart from, I would say, the fullbacks. They're quite progressive with their passing, but see a statistic here: passes between 5 and 25 yards. AC Milan have 8,515, and Roma, who play a similar style of play, and if you've seen them, you know they play possession football with a high line, aggressive pressing, and they have 7,898 passes between 5 and 25 yards, which might suggest that Roma are a bit more ambitious with their passing. AC Milan like to control the game in the opposition's half, which is supplemented by their high defensive line with aggressive pressing. And we'll see that the pressures in the final third for AC Milan are 1,105, and Roma have 801. So they're pretty comparable figures, and Roma play a similar style of play, but they're doing a bit better in the league. We'll just move on here. Yeah, we'll just look at the strengths of AC Milan. And as we mentioned earlier, their strengths are mainly defensively. So they're very good at stealing the ball from opposition. They rank 5th in Serie A for tackles per game, which is pretty impressive considering they keep 54% possession on average. So to rank 5th in tackles per game, which is usually dominated by teams who have less possession, is a pretty impressive figure. They're also quite good at defending set pieces. Across the squad, they tend to have quite tall players, especially with Ibra coming in. Çalhanoğlu's fairly tall as a forward as well. Also, they've got Romagnoli and all their defenders, and then keeper like Donnarumma, who isn't outstanding, but he's definitely an above average keeper, I would suggest. And finally, they're very good at ball progression from deep, especially they like to emphasise the ball progression through their fullbacks. So we can see here, Davide Calabria completes 9.5 progressive passes per 90 minutes. If we compare that to Juan Cuadrado, who's seen as quite a attacking fullback in Serie A, he completes just 8.4 progressive passes per 90. And many people have argued that Calabria has had a bit of a poor season. So that just goes to show how much of an emphasis there is placed on their fullbacks to progress the ball.
Yeah, and there should be for the next game. I mean, for the game against Juventus, there have been talks about Conte playing instead of Calabria. It all depends on whether Conte will be fit, but there's usually a rotation that Pioli employs between the two. Yeah,
I think if it was me, I would choose Calabria because I think he's more suited to a 4-4-2, and Conte is typically used to playing further up the field as a wing back. And now, if we just look at their weaknesses of the side, as we mentioned earlier, they've been poor going forward, but particularly poor with their finishing. Christoph Piątek, when he was here at the first half of the season, he had 7.52 expected goals, but only 4 goals from those expected goals. And I think when you look at expected goals per 90, this season at AC Milan, he had more expected goals per 90 than he did under Genoa last season. So it just goes to show he did have the chances. He just wasn't finishing them this season. Whether that be unlucky or poor finishing, that's up to you.
Or the number 9 jersey.
There's a number 9 curse. I know that at my club, Chelsea. Oh, it's a real thing for sure.
For those who don't know, the number 9 jersey of AC Milan is supposedly cursed. So since Inzaghi vacated that in 2012, big players like Higuain, Pato, they have chosen it as their jersey, but they were never able to hold on to it for more than one season. So they either they were basically they transferred after 1 year of wearing the number 9 jersey. Oh, and I forgot Fernando Torres among this list. So that's why they're saying that the number 9 jersey is just cursed. I guess it's supposed to be Filippo Inzaghi's jersey forever.
Well, players avoid it now, don't they? They avoid using the number 9 jersey just in case.
Exactly. Highly suggested to not pick it.
Yeah, it's just the pressure. I think just the pressure. If we look at a bit more of AC Milan's weaknesses as a team, they commit quite a lot of individual errors going forward and defensively. So they struggle to keep possession, and you'll see that their unsuccessful touches per game is 17.1 across the starting 11, which is the highest within Serie A. So that is something they just need to work on. It's just their inability to work together as a side has been clear throughout the season. And then finally, although they attempt to keep possession, they actually struggle in this regard, particularly against sides such as Juventus, such as Roma. And their dispossessions per game is 10.1 across the starting 11, which is the 4th highest in Serie A. So it's just that cohesiveness that they have lacked this season that's not helped them at all.
Let me go back to the point that I think it's because you have really mediocre players. So we talked about how they try to complete a lot of short passes, but at the same time, they make a lot of individual errors because they have the highest percentage of individual errors in the league, and they struggle to keep possession. So I think that this backs up my point that the problem are the players and not the coaches. You just don't have the level of quality that AC Milan used to have back in the day.
Well, then you can also look at it as some of the best coaches get the best out of bad players, don't they? We look at Antonio Conte. He's done this across his career. You think about Italy Euro 2016 side. He used some players which don't even get starts for their team, and they did really well at Euro 2016. So you can look at it either way, I suppose.
I'd just jump in there from a coaching perspective. I think if you go back to that first half, I'd be really interested to understand where they give the ball away in those moments. So from my perspective as a coach, if you give the ball away 10 times in a game, but you're giving them away on the edge of your box in your third, then that's a real issue. But if you're giving it away half the pitch, the potential is that you're trying to create opportunities. So that's one area of the dispossessions. I'd be interested to find out where they give the ball away, and the same with the individual errors. But I think from a coaching perspective, there's good coaching and bad coaching, and it depends on, like you say, whether you can get the best out of the players. And if you don't have the players to build from the back or play through midfield or whatever, then don't do that. And I think with them, what they've shown is, as you mentioned earlier, with the fullbacks, is that they go round the opposition a lot. Use the fullbacks to progress the ball forwards, try and go round opposition. So if they are giving the ball away in those areas, in the wide areas, then they're not necessarily conceding or getting hurt quickly from those possessions. So if he doesn't feel that he can build up through midfield, then he's obviously going round. But at the same time, he is potentially getting the best out of the players he has. But let's be fair, this is Serie A. There's no bad players in Serie A. Comparatively speaking, it's just comparative to the quality he has. Maybe he's had to find a different way of doing things than he wanted to.
Yeah, maybe the pressure of being the AC Milan coach makes you want to dominate the game, or at least give the impression that you're trying to do it. I don't know, several things come into play here. But let's move on to the next preview. So on Saturday, we're going to have Napoli against Inter. They're starting from a 1-0 aggregate when Fabian Ruiz scored a curler at San Siro. Steve, help us understand what to expect from this second leg.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I don't know if you want to talk about your man Caljon. I know you spent a bit of time doing some digging around him and whether he's going to be important to the game to start with.
Yeah, let's do that. Let me first talk about the lineup. So supposedly Napoli will play with a 4-3-3, which Gennaro Gattuso likes a lot. We'll have Ospina in goal. The back four will be Di Lorenzo, Maksimovic, Koulibaly, and Mario Rui. Demme, Fabian Ruiz, and Zelinski in the midfield. Callejon, Mertens, and Insigne on top. Inter will play with Conte's trademarked 3-5-2. Handanovic in goal. D'Ambrosio, Skriniar, and Bastoni will be the back three. Candreva, Barella, Brozovic, Sensi, and Ashley Young will be the midfield of five. And then Lukaku and Lautaro on top. Yeah, about Callejon. So he has significantly dropped his goal average in the past 2 seasons at Napoli. So right now his goal scoring frequency is about 0.1 goals per 90 minutes average. Don't get me wrong, he's still a key player for Napoli because he has he assists 0.3 times per 90 minutes, and he's also third in the league for key passes per 90. So in terms of passing abilities, he still remains probably the most important player for Napoli, but he has been struggling to score, which is why also we have seen him being subbed off, especially in the most recent Serie A games.
Yeah, in the first leg, we actually covered a bit of the first leg last week in our Inter stuff. For those of you who listened, so it's a really interesting game, this one. So the difference between this game and the game they played against each other in Serie A was quite vast. Obviously, the result was very different. But so Napoli, in terms of the passes per defensive action, we talked about this a lot last week. So passes per defensive action is the amount of passes that the opposition make in their first 60% of the pitch, so their first 2/3, in terms of how many passes are made from a pressing action. So Napoli were down at 6, which is quite low, which means they potentially pressed it a lot higher up the pitch than not. Whereas Inter was down at 16, which tells you that they potentially dropped off a little bit more and allowed Napoli to come onto them. The knock-on effect for this was, the counter-attacking side of things was a real issue for Inter. They rely heavily on Lukaku and Martinez in that moment. So trying to create those moments of counter-attack are limited if they're going to sit a little bit deeper potentially. Whereas interesting in the game in Serie A, Inter won 3-1, and their passes per defensive action was a lot lower, and the goals came from counter-attacks. So it'd be interesting to see what Conte does this time around, whether he decides he wants to come and press a little bit higher like they have done previously, or whether they're just going to sit off and defend a little bit deeper. As we talked about last week, sometimes with the Napoli build-up, the ability for them to drag Inter to one side and affect the win-back space either in front or behind it was a real issue for them. So it'll be interesting to see how Conte challenges that side of things. And Napoli's commitment to building out from the back is obviously really fundamental to the way they play. So even in the last game, 26 times under pressure to establish their attacking moments. So expect to see a lot more of Napoli trying to build from the back, using the deep line midfield players to help in that moment to try and stretch Inter across the pitch. And when they're able to establish possession, the midfield three that Danny mentioned earlier, they made 191 passes between them with a 92% completion rate. So it just goes to show you that how dominant they were in those moments, and whether Inter can change that, and whether they're going to sit deep to absorb some pressure and then find Lukaku and Martinez on the counter, or whether they're going to come higher and press. They've done both in both games this year, and it'll be interesting to see which way they decide to go. So yeah, we just move on and have a look. Go on, Danny.
Sorry, let me say something about your point about Napoli's passing abilities. We have Fabian Ruiz, who has the second most passes per 90 in Serie A. And you know who the first is? The first one is Napoli's left back Mario Rui. And also Fabian Ruiz has the most passes in the final third, which just adds to the fact of how dangerous this guy is with his passing skills.
Yeah, and if you have the ability to play through teams with him, or you have the ability to play around teams, then it gives you so many different strings to your bow in terms of the way you can attack. And they use either one depending on what the opposition provide in terms of a threat. So.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of the Napoli key to victory, it's really important for them that they can pin Inter back in their defensive line of 5 with minimal numbers. So that limits the collective pressing opportunities that Inter can use. And when the wing-backs are in the line of 5 and they're being pinned in by the 2 Napoli wide players with potentially Mertens off the front and into the midfield line to overload that area, there are times in the first leg, for example, where Napoli created a 5 versus 3 in the midfield, but a 2 versus 5 in the top line. So that means that the Inter wing back can't get out and press hard up the pitch to press the fullback, for example. So then it limits the amount of times they can move themselves up the pitch, but also it creates so many opportunities for Napoli to dominate the midfield area, as we spoke last week about Lukaku and Martinez at the top. Once they play round or through those guys, then you have this overload situation in the midfield. So one of the keys is for Napoli to be able to push Inter back and into their own third with potentially up to 5 players defending only 2 wide players.
Yeah, Napoli is probably the worst team for Inter to face because, like you said, with their passing abilities and with their courage, because Gattuso always tries to transmit this idea of building out from the back. Inter is going to have to struggle. Like you pointed that out in the show last week, that Napoli is able to stretch them, create 2v1s on the side, or like in the case that you're going to discuss now, 3v2s offensively.
Yeah, so when Napoli are able to do that, you find that to press the ball and deal with the overload in the midfield, for example, that you, as I spoke about last week, you'll find that the centre back come out of the line to press the dropping forward off the front, or someone in midfield where they have more numbers. But the knock-on effect is sometimes you end up in a situation, for those who can see on the screen now, where you have a recovering wing back trying desperately to get back in from pressing higher up the pitch, with one centre back, with all 3 Napoli front players now attacking just 2 players. So the more times they can provoke into pressing hard up the pitch and forcing players out of position, the more opportunity they're going to have to actually hurt the opposition. So in the first kind of key point there, that's enabling them to dominate possession like they want to do, like Gattuso wants to try and do all over the pitch. But to actually really create and hurt Inter, it's going to be moments like this where they've provoked something that Inter don't really want to do, but they feel like they have to. And then the knock-on effect is they end up with moments where they can really hurt Inter in and around the back 3 for sure.
What about the keys for Conte's 3-5-2?
Yeah, so for me, it's a real kind of flip on the head type scenario. The higher up the pitch that Inter can get their wing backs in possession, they can establish them higher up the pitch for crossing opportunities. Obviously, the threat of Lukaku in the centre of the pitch there will always be a real threat. You know, there was 3-headed chances that they created from crosses from wide areas, but also it means that the Napoli defensive line has to include the wide players. The wide players have to drop in and defend in Gattuso's system. So it limits the amount of time that they can obviously bring the ball forward and hurt Inter quickly around the sides. So the higher up the pitch that they can get the wing backs and build off of them, either through midfield or directly into the box, then that's a real key for them to create opportunities to score from. And then if they decide that they want to come and play on the counter a little bit more, this is an image from the first game in Serie A where Lukaku especially was frightening on the counter, where they've encouraged Napoli to come on and sat much deeper. But if they're going to sit deeper, they also have to be able to throw punches and counter quickly. So the quicker they can find the front two in the spaces in and around or in front of the back three is going to be real key for them to create open spaces for Lukaku, especially to run into with Martinez running off of him. So if they can do that, then they can definitely create problems with either of those two solutions against the Napoli defensive organisation for sure.
I remember the goal that Lukaku scored at away at Napoli on a counter-attack situation that you just explained. He just showcased power, speed, and just, I don't know if you remember the finishing, was a left-footed finish.
It's unbelievable finish, and I think with Martinez running off of him, do you go with the runner? Do you still stick with the ball? From a defensive point of view, it's really difficult to make a decision quickly there.
Absolutely. And so why don't we go around and try to predict maybe the results of these games? I'll kick us off. I kind of want to do it. So I'll speak about the Juventus AC Milan game. I think that Juventus will control the game just because results and stats tell us that they are more dominant, both collectively and individually. In terms of AC Milan, I think that knowing that they need to score, at the same time, they don't have to rush things. It's going to be a long game. They are the worst side. They're missing key players. So they need to stay in the game as long as they can. Take every set piece as it's a situation of life or death, and then risk more things as time runs out. What I will say, if I were to just randomly guess, I would say that it's going to be another 1-1, and when the game comes to PKs, we're going to have a young Donnarumma prevail over an old Buffon, and the AC Milan is going to clinch at the final.
You'd love that, wouldn't you?
I needed to say that, Tom. What do you think?
I'm going to take a counter narrative on that. I think Juventus cleans their clocks out. It's 3-0. Ronaldo, the beast, needs to get fed on this. And I just think it's too much, too fast for an AC Milan team that's just got pieces missing. And
missing players, aren't they?
Those pieces are, but I just think it's going to be a blowout, and it's going to hurt AC Milan fans. Sorry, Daniele, but that's when you have to fight the beast with a rock, bad things are going to happen. So, Steve, what's your take?
Yeah, for me, Juventus win the game. I think they've just got a little bit too much. Like Danny says, AC Milan have to come and try and win the game. They've got to get a positive result or at least score in the game. I think that plays into Juventus' hands, and I think they'll have too much for Milan for me.
Give me a scoreline.
Well, the first game was pretty dull, to be honest. I don't expect it to be much different. 1-0 maybe Juventus on the counter. Dybala in the pocket, runs beyond, maybe Ronaldo finishing, cutting in off the side. Yeah, 1-0.
Tom, show some ambition. What tell us what you think is going to happen here?
I think Juve are going to win as well, but I do think Milan did well considering how poor they've been in comparison to Juventus this season. But it's just those three missing players, Theo Hernandez and Ibrahimović specifically. I think 2-0 Juventus. That would be my guess.
I'll say one thing. Watch out for Ante Rebic. That guy has a lot of motivation. He has things. But what about the next game, Steve? Since you were deep into the analysis, give us a scoreline.
Yeah, this one's going to be a fascinating one. I think it will depend heavily on what Conte decides to do. But for me, Napoli probably win. I say probably because I'm not 100% sure, but I think Napoli win the game. They'll dominate possession, and depending on whether Lukaku can be dangerous on the counter, if Inter can give you those opportunities. But yeah, Napoli are in front and controlling right now, and they probably sneak through.
You know what? I agree. I'm a fan of the 4-3-3, and I'm a fan of Napoli's numbers in terms of passing. And also, yes, Chris, I am biased toward Gattuso because he was an AC Milan player. You were going to say it. I saw your face, Chris. So I'm going to go with 2-0 Napoli. And I would like to see at least one goal from Callejon because I just analyzed him. So I want him to come back and score again.
Tom, what's your take?
I can't say I've looked at this game in all too much depth, but I think I'd agree. I think Napoli will probably win this game. But just because they're just coming back from not playing for months, I think it might be a bit more dull. So I'm just going to go for another 1-0.
Well, I wish I could be more dramatic, but I think it's going to be a uneventful 1-1, and Napoli will advance.
So nobody believes in Conte, huh?
Not this year. So Lukaku is an X factor. He's a beast when he wants to be. Maybe he gets lucky and he changed the terms of engagement, but I just wonder, particularly with people coming off such a long stay, that are people going to fire on all cylinders? And for the way these teams are set up, I'm just thinking more stalemate, and we'll see where it goes.
Fair enough.
All right, guys. Well, I think that wraps us up for today. I would like to thank Total Football Analysis. They are the largest open source analyst network. Guys, we've got a great couple of games. We're going to have some things to talk about. Thank you so much. And this is the professor saying bella ciao, bella ciao.
Signore e signori, that's all for our show. One more time, I would like to thank Enrico Italian Bistro for their support, and the North Carolina FC and North Carolina Courage soccer clubs. See you soon, guys. A presto. Ciao.